You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio. So, hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Changing Reality. Welcome one, welcome all. If this is the first time you're tuning in, where have you been all this time? Don't you know that this is the show to be at? And if you're a returning member of our audience, thank you so much for tuning in once again. We truly appreciate you joining in for each and every single one of these episodes, and hope that you're having as much as fun as I am as we go through all of these phenomenal stories and interviews. So for all of you who are new, Changing Reality is essentially a show that features phenomenal people from all walks of life who are, in essence, changing their own reality. And through these interviews, through these conversations, we get to hang out with some of the most brilliant individuals that you'll ever meet. From social change makers, entrepreneurs, industry leaders, to business owners, artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals from all across the world, and many of whom have actually spent some time here on the Penn campus as well. So the idea is that by hearing these inspiring stories on how they managed to change the world around them, we'd be able to pick up these little nuggets of wisdom that we could use for our own lives, to shorten our own learning curves, to implement lessons that will hopefully make our journey a little bit easier, and at the same time to give us clarity in where we are today and how we can use the skills, the lessons, the strengths that we have to navigate this world a little clearer. And this is a show that I wanted to do simply because I felt like there are a lot of people out there who make waves in the lives of those around them. And I'm super passionate about uncovering these stories because I believe that stories have the power to change the world. And it's stories that actually keep us all going, that keep us not only on the right track, but actually enable us to pick up lessons that could literally change our lives. And to show you how powerful the stories that I've encountered have been in my life, and how stories as a whole have been so instrumental to my own journey and my own career. A little introduction about me. My name is Harsha, your host for the show. And I actually founded and run a youth movement called Ascendance that started back at home in Malaysia, where I was from, but today has gone on to collaborate with not just our own Malaysian Ministry of Education, but has actually gone on to work with 26 different countries to create an alternative education platform for any student who wants to change their reality. So we essentially work with students from elementary all the way up to college through various sessions, programs, experiential learning activities, and projects that help them discover their passion, learn about themselves and the world around them, and start their own careers while they're still in school that has meaningful impact not just for themselves, but for those around them as well. And to date, we've been fortunate to work with over 50,000 students, 900 communities, and have incubated countless number of student-run projects and even social enterprises run by students as young as 8 to 25 years old. And the power or the thing that powers all of this, the reason we've been able to do all of this has been stories. It's been kind individuals who've taken time out of their busy schedules and have gone out there to share their experiences, their stories, and what made a difference for them. So just like that, I hope that this show is that same platform for all of you, so that through this show, you'd be able to get the things that matter most to you, get the things that would be able to push you further in your journey, and hopefully uncover the things that you're trying to learn about at the same time. So if there's any specific themes, topics, experiences, industries that you want to cover, make sure that you reach out to us either through email, through our show chat, or through our Instagram or any other platform that we're out there, so that we can make sure that we address the stories that are going to be most meaningful to you. So yeah, drop us a message and we'd love to connect. Moving to our speaker for today, we have someone who has truly an amazing journey to share with us. I think when I first heard her speak, it was at an event where it was a networking session. There were many people on the call, but I think within the short kind of 90 seconds that she had the stage, she absolutely blew my mind with her experiences and with the depth of things that she's actually gone through, and how today she's actually using those experiences to make a difference in a sector of people that I truly believe need help, which is fellow social entrepreneurs. So our speaker today is actually the president and executive coach at Excellence Unbounded. She is a certified executive coach and also a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel who has more than 20 years of experience leading and coaching high-performance individuals, teams, and organizations, both in peacetime and wartime, and has I think has 3 combat deployments herself. In addition, she has been one of the probably most well-traveled executive coaches you could meet. She's visited 35 countries across 6 continents and has a very unique perspective and on cultural sensitivities to better serve diverse groups of clients. She's also someone who holds an MBA from the Wharton School, so of course, amazing to have our alumni in the show. But today, she and her organization, Excellence Unbounded, is on a mission to unlock the excellence that exists in every social entrepreneur and helping them lead change to the challenge the status quo. So, without further ado, let's welcome this amazing individual, welcoming Shawnette to our virtual stage. So, hi,
Hi,
Shawnette, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on the show and also for the warm welcome. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And one thing that I okay, there's many things I truly love about your story. I mean, the focus on social entrepreneurship, the brilliant experiences that you've had. And honestly, there's so much for us to talk about and unpack that I just have to start off by asking, how on earth did you become the person you are today? You are someone who just follows your heart, who does so much good in a sense, and at the same time has always kind of keeps the positive atmosphere alive and the excitement alive. So tell me a little bit about where your story starts in a sense. How were you like when you were a kid or when you were first starting out and deciding where you wanted to be in this world?
Oh, thank you. You're very kind. So I would really have to credit my parents and my family with the person that I am today. I grew up in a military family. My father was in the Army. And so every 2 or 3 years, we would move to a new place. And having my siblings and my parents with me really allowed me to be flexible and adaptable and resilient as we were making all of those changes. But it also allowed me to see at a very young age that it was easy to get into kind of a groove or a rhythm, sometimes a rut, and forget that there were other possibilities out there. And so, by virtue of us moving every 2 or 3 years, I was going to these different states across the country and meeting different people who had had different experiences and different perspectives. And that really opened me up to realize that the possibilities were probably more vast than I could perceive at any particular moment. But if I stayed curious, that I would have the opportunities to learn new things, meet new people, and kind of be consistently challenging myself.
No, very, very well said in a way. And as you talk about moving around as a kid, going to different places and all that, you are someone today who is so much social and emotional intelligence in a sense. And I'm sure part of that took root during your childhood as well. But many kids in that situation where they're moving around and so on actually have kind of the opposite effect happen to them. So they become more withdrawn, they become a little bit more it becomes a little harder for them to engage and all of that. So, how did you, or what do you think was different about you or your experiences growing up that actually enabled you to adapt to these different environments, that enabled you to understand these different groups of people, and that essentially enabled you to thrive in an environment that was kind of constantly in cycle, in motion, and in changing?
Great question. So I think there were a few things. I have to credit my mother for one key component, because I will say that while I certainly grew to handle the change better, that from probably maybe like the start of second grade when we moved, and we were starting over in a new state at that point, up until probably the first day of 10th grade, which was also beginning in a new place. Each time that we would move on the first day of school, I would have an emotional meltdown because, because I would have all of this anxiety that I wouldn't be able to form friendships, that nobody would like me. And my mother would always come and sit with me and comfort me and get me to see that remember when we did this before and you went and you made friends? And so having a support system at a, at a young age was really critical. But then what would happen when I would get to school on that first day in a new place each time, I would start to talk to somebody. And whether it took a minute, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, we could find something that we had in common. And that created the space for us to then have different conversations. And so I think that experience each time that we would move would allow me to recognize that even though this was what I felt on the inside and the narrative that I had for that fear, that if I took a step and reached out to try to engage with people, that I would find something in common. And now it's kind of a game that I play when I travel and I engage with people, is trying to see how quickly we can find shared interests and then engage in a deeper conversation about that, and then maybe talk about something where we don't have something in common.
I love that in a sense, just because that's such a relatable story. Like my sister, I remember all the way from kindergarten up until she was like a grown up, for like the first day of like any new environment or new school, she'd be like, "Mom, could you come with me? Could you like follow me in for this?" It went all the way up until she was like in driving school, and my mom's like, "No, you're 18 now. Like I'm not gonna go with you to driving school." So like it's something so relatable in a sense, but you really had, I would say, the kind of the maturity of thought, that innate sense to put that aside and say, okay, yes, this is how I feel, but this is not always the reality of it. And I think those past experiences help you kind of understand that. So very, very like amazing perspective. You also went into, you mentioned military family, so okay, makes sense, you follow in, your parents' footsteps and all of that. But what was it for you that made you seriously like consider a career in the military? And how does one even, go about making that decision? It's a huge decision in a sense. And how do you start planning for your future, planning for your, the career that you want, um, as someone like in combat, on deployment in a way?
For me, it actually started, we were living in Maine at the time, and Desert Storm happened. And depending on how that had unfolded, then our next assignment was going to be in Kentucky, and the unit there was deployed. And so it was a very rare, it was a reality that had the war continued, that my dad would have deployed. And that was the first time that I was having to deal with anything like that. And so I started to think more about what was military service, how could it be valuable. And because I'd had a good life, I didn't necessarily love moving every 2 to 3 years. But again, I was moving with the people that I was closest to. And so our circumstances and our location changed, but our family remained the same. And I still had that organic structure, which made it easier. So for me, I thought, wow, I've lived a really good life. This would be a way to give back while also creating some new opportunities for myself. And so I ended up talking to a neighbor's boyfriend who had gone to West Point, and when he was home on Christmas vacation, asking him questions about it, because I was interested in ROTC programs with different universities and then West Point. And he was kind enough to give me some time, and another neighbor who had gone to West Point shared a little bit of his experiences. My dad talked to me about his experiences with an ROTC program. And then I did a visit when I was a junior to West Point, and I found it to be so challenging that I thought, wow, this is a place where I won't be able to hide from my fears. I won't be able to just get by. I'll have to do my best consistently in order to do well. And I liked the idea of that. I thought this will afford me the opportunity to grow. And so I applied and ended up going to West Point. And then when you graduate from there, you get commissioned as an officer in the United States Army.
Okay. Like that itself shows a lot of persistence, a lot of research that actually went into, making this decision. So that's something that you took lightly in a sense. Very, very cool. But we often watch a lot of these movies, about people, they go to West Point, they get deployed and all of that. And you have a very movie-like story of yourself in a sense. So if you have like if somebody does approach you for the rights of the movie, I expect I'd at least get like a shout out, when you're getting the Emmy nominations and all of that. But you know
Absolutely.
tell me how it was like, your first actual commission out there. Where were you headed in a sense, and how did you actually feel? Because we always have this very glamorized version of it that is very Hollywood wash. But for you in that moment, in a sense, how did it actually feel, and what was that initial experience like?
So my first assignment was actually in South Korea in a town called Uijeongbu, and it is very close to the DMZ, so the demilitarized zone. And I was a platoon leader, so I was responsible for a group of soldiers, and the company was at a different camp. So I was in charge and also removed from my immediate leadership, which gave me more control, more responsibility, and also for the mission that we did on that camp. And so it was it was a good experience because I had a really good non-commissioned officer who helped teach me the things that I needed to know in order to be successful in that role. And I think that that's one of the great things that the military does with its structure is you have new officers in roles with experienced non-commissioned officers who have been doing this for a very long time. And so it gives you the opportunity to learn while you're also in charge and ultimately responsible. So it requires you to be flexible and also to be open to learning because the person who's teaching you is someone that you outrank, but they have the depth of knowledge and experience. And I think it's a really beautiful way to design it because in certain professions, it's expected that when you get there, that you know everything. And even if you don't, that you pretend until you figure it out over time. And the Army structures it so that everybody that you're leading knows that you're brand new and you don't know. They know that you've been trained to become an officer and you've gone to a course prior to coming to them to teach you more about the specifics of the specialty that you're in. But in terms of how things go day to day, you still have to be open to learning and to allowing that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to figure some things out. You're probably going to be embarrassed a few times. And it was a great experience that I had because I had a good non-commissioned officer. I had good soldiers, and they were able to help teach me over time so that I became a good officer and had a good command of what it was that we were actually there to do.
No, I really like, the way that you said this is a very, like effective way of learning in a sense. And we are used to the hierarchy of like if you're there, you're certain rank, you are the know all of all the information and all the experience in a sense. So I really do love the way that you kind of articulated how it's structured and kind of that dual learning process where you both have the expertise but also are learning on a day-to-day basis in a sense, and people acknowledge that, people support that in a way. I'm so curious in a sense. Did you ever have a moment where you felt out of your depth in a sense? And how did you kind of find the people within kind of your like those around you in a sense of who do I go to? Where do I even start asking for help in a sense? And how do I actually get back on track? Was that something that happened to you in those initial phases, or how did you navigate not knowing things? Because obviously, being new and everyone having been there for a while, there would be at least one or two things that probably took you off guard. But what do you do when those situations arise?
Yes. So actually, I think that probably one quick story to share that kind of highlights a little bit of what you're talking about. When I was a captain, I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and I was tasked to do an investigation of someone that was believed to have possibly fabricated awards and other things that they had not actually won and put on their record. And I got tasked with this, and I had no idea how to really begin to carry out this investigation, but I knew that they needed me to do it quickly, quietly, and to produce whatever information so that they could take action if it turned out that the accusations were true. And I remember what I remembered in the beginning was something that my dad had told me, which was you have to keep talking to people and asking the same questions sometimes, because if you just ask one person, they tell you, they're telling you what they know, not necessarily what is or what the limitations are. And then other people, they don't know and they won't try to help you because they're not in a position to help you. But if you keep asking different people, you'll eventually uncover enough information that you can determine how to proceed. And so what I did, because I just didn't have any real clue of how am I supposed to figure this out with the different sort of accusations that are there and not really knowing at that point where to begin. And so I started talking to a few people. And I talked to a lady that I knew from my church, and she was in human resources. And so she then said, "Oh, if you call here, and here's this like agency that exists that can answer these questions," and so on and so forth. And so bit by bit, I just went about having these different conversations, and each person had a new direction that they could point me into. And then by the end of, like, I think it was a week and a half, I had validated that in fact this person had fabricated these awards. I put everything together and went to the Judge Advocate General, who was attached to our unit, and laid it out. And he was like, "This is the most comprehensive, detailed, like we've got everything that we need, and let's go meet with the brigade commander so that we can walk him through and make the recommendation that the CID the takes it and does the interview and all of that." And so for me, it was an experience where I started off not having any real clue. And just by talking to different people, I eventually got to somebody that was knowledgeable and was willing to share that knowledge with me. And then it was really just about getting moving. And I found that to be the case whether I was deployed and kind of confronted with a situation that I wasn't really clear about how to proceed, or even now in my, running my business, I come across things all the time where I'm like, I'm not really sure what's the best course of action, but I engage my network of friends who have, different perspectives, different knowledge, and they'll often share something that sparks or point me in the right direction. And so I think when we get in those situations, it's really about being open to learning and then getting moving to talk to the different people that can share their knowledge with us.
So I think I cut out just at the time you finished your story, but
No worries.
absolutely brilliant, Noe. And I think the movie in my mind of your life just swapped from like Top Gun to like Mission Impossible, with all the piecing of information and all the investigative, you know like angle of it. So very, very, I would say very fascinating. And as entrepreneurs, we often like to dramatize the struggles we face, and talk about how the entrepreneurship world is like a battleground in a sense. You probably have a different opinion on that, but today you coach entrepreneurs. You yourself are an entrepreneur in a sense. So what do you think is the most valuable lesson that you took away from your time this very unique experience of being deployed, in a sense, that today supports you in the most unexpected ways when you coach other entrepreneurs and when you go through your entrepreneur journey as well. Maybe give us a story of something that you pull back to even now when you're in this kind of corporate battlefield versus the actual real life, much more intense thing.
Yes, I think for me, there are kind of two things that I draw on. One is that within the military, you become a community with the people that you're serving with in your unit, and so you're constantly you have people that new people that come and people that will go, but this is the team that you're with, and so you focus on building and cultivating that team. And I think as an entrepreneur, and particularly as solopreneur, you have to build your own team so that you also have support and that you're able to offer support, because that's really, I think, how we're intended to thrive as people, when we're extending support to others and when we're receiving support when we need it, and having that interplay. So I constantly go back to that to sort of emphasize and keep top of mind for myself the need to create that community and to nourish it. And it really consists of many of my business school classmates, many of my West Point classmates, and people that I've met along the way who have really offered me a lot of value in just in knowing them and knowing their story. And I think another thing that I take from my deployment experience, I've shared this with several people, is there's something that happens when you deploy where you get to whatever theater of operation that you're in, and as a part of creating instant structure, you find out what the battle rhythm is. And what the battle rhythm is it's like the master calendar of all of the different things that are happening. And many of them don't apply to you depending on what your role is, and then others do apply to you. But it creates immediate structure so that like every day at 3 p.m., there's this meeting that I need to attend. Every day at noon, there's this thing. This happens every day, or, every second Tuesday, or whatever it is. And I think as entrepreneurs, we absolutely need to be flexible and adaptable, but we also need to create certain structure that supports us being productive. And so I constantly go back to that, and I revise and adjust as necessary, but I always have my own master battle rhythm that, on this Tuesday, like at this time, I'm doing these things at, on this date at this time. And that helps create structure so that I ensure that those things get done, but it also ensures that I don't allow for my calendar to just, anybody that wants to can just fill up my entire day with external things, and I don't have the ability to do the internal work, or even just the deeper thought work that our roles require.
Oh gosh, I love that. And I love the phrasing, the battle rhythm, in a sense. It's so much more cooler than telling people you need like discipline and structure and you're like, battle rhythm. Okay, I'm using that from now on. Yeah, but that's so true in a very much more lame example than actual like someone actually employed. But I remember, as a student entrepreneur, and we work with a lot of student entrepreneurs, we used to joke that that first year or that first few months outside of like when you finish school and do entrepreneurship full time is the
Mhm.
worst months of your life, because you just become so lazy, and like you're used to having like a very limited amount of time to work on your venture, and then now that you have all the time in the world, you become terribly unproductive. And I remember, my one of my mentors used to say, meet me at 8 a.m. every day for like the first like couple of almost, I think, months or weeks after
Mm.
you like now that you don't have school. And I used to get up at 8 a.m. And get so worried, like, oh gosh, I'm late, and go for these meetings. And for the longest time, like, it's not like we had the most productive discussions every morning. But after a while, I
Mhm.
realized what he was trying to do is just wake me up in the morning and set my mind to work, in a sense. and that I
Yeah.
needed some form of structure. If not, I'd get into that kind of like, not even laziness, but kind of this abyss of nothing that I think a lot of entrepreneurs can kind of fall into if they're not careful, where that lack
Yeah.
of structure really kind of bottles you down. So it's something we do with our students today, but we don't have as cool of an experience or as cool of a name to back it up. So I'm going to steal this story and make them watch this episode whenever I'm trying to explain this better, because you did like a much nicer job at it, tying all of that together. Battle rhythm. Okay, I love that in a sense. You also spent some very interesting amount of time, I think, after you were done, like in deployment in a sense, just traveling, and then going to different parts of the world, and really starting, I think, your own journey of kind of the next phase of your career. Why did you choose to do that in a sense? Tell me a little bit about your time kind of transitioning out of your career in the military. Why did you choose to leave in a sense? And how did you kind of decide what you wanted to go on to next?
Yeah. Yes. So I like this question because it opens up what for me was the process of letting go. I was reaching the 20-year mark in my military career. And for me, I had really done everything that I wanted to do. And I had gotten everything that I felt I could get out of that experience. I was eager to do new things, and I knew that I couldn't do those new things while I was still in uniform on active duty. And so I started probably 2 years out just working with a coach. It was through a program with the International Coaching Federation. As a member, they allow you to sign up for like peer reciprocal coaching, is what it's called. And it's very inexpensive, and you coach somebody, and then somebody coaches you. And it allows you to continue to develop your coaching skills and to receive coaching on an issue that, whatever you'd like to work on, you can use that time. And I used mine to really wrestle with the fact that even though I knew I wanted to move on, the process of declaring that and making that known was very difficult. And engaging in that inner work and recognizing that a lot of it was about not being prepared to be kind of moved to the side, because once they know that you're going to retire, okay, you're still here, but you're not going to be here. We're not going to like invest further resources in you. You need to do things to prepare for retirement. And I wasn't used to being like in that category. I didn't want to allow that, which is ultimately about the ego, right? It's not about anything more than that, but I wasn't prepared for that. And so I was still kind of like holding on and being quiet, even though I was making other plans. And what I really wanted to do was to take a sabbatical. And so I engaged in a few conversations with Wharton classmates. And what I found was that each person opened my mind to think about another possibility of how I could use the time. And before I knew it, I was planning to start in South Asia, in Bangladesh, and I was going to go and like, get a chance to look at microfinance on the ground and meet with different people, and then kind of continuing on. And so from that experience, what I really took was that we can often start with a dream, but we need to also be aware that it's constrained by what we're able to perceive. And so kind of like a horse with blinders, I saw this much of it, but through conversations with my classmates, they kept pulling the blinders back more and more. And as I let go of the need to have everything planned out and under total control, which I was very accustomed to in the military, then I was able to design something. Kind of, it was emerging, and I was designing it in real time moving forward, and learning so much more about the world and entrepreneurs and their challenges on the ground, and about myself.
I really, I think you articulated that in a beautiful manner. That we often have a perception of how things are. We have a goal, we have something we want, but we're very narrow, we're limited in that by our own lens. And conversations with different people, different perspectives help us broaden that perspective.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Tell me a little bit about your time traveling, in a sense, and and building off what you said about broadening the perspective. I feel like, and this could just be something exclusive to my generation, that we're not very present, in a sense. And it's something that I see when we travel, when I travel, even, in a sense. And I'm not going to blame it completely on the smartphone and all of that. I just mean that sometimes I feel like our minds are wired to just move from one thing to another and things like that, partly due to the like the internet, not gonna lie. But even like when I
Mhm.
travel right now, I'm going from like one meeting to another meeting to the next thing, in a sense. I find it very hard to be in the present, in a sense, and really, really be in the moment and understand what's happening in the moment and contextualize that and understand what or make sense of the experiences that I'm having, without my mind jumping to the next thing, or what's happening next and all that. And I think I'm fortunate that I'm at least aware, and I try to center myself back. But I think a lot more people, especially my age now, traveling, have that same issue, and they don't even realize that their focus is going out, in a sense. And I believe, to your point of speaking to people, having those conversations, broadening that perceptive reception, it's not just about traveling, it's not just about meeting people, it's about having the presence of mind to understand what they're saying, to understand the experiences that we're having around us. How do you go about making sure that you weren't just going from one place to another, but really understanding where you were, what that place had to teach you, in a sense? And how do you kind of contextualize
Mm.
those experiences in your own journey?
Yes. So I started out when I was designing my sabbatical, I had kind of like a big long list of all these places, and then I started thinking about, well, in order to get the benefit and also kind of make it so that it's affordable, I need to stay, region by region, and plan that way. And then I backed out further and I said, well, I want to do longer stays in at least three places. And I knew Spain was going to be one of them. I wanted to spend 3 months in Spain, and I wanted to spend 3 months in Medellin, Colombia. And then it became the third place that I was going to spend 3 months was in India. And that was the first one. I went there after I left Bangladesh. And then everything else was kind of like, we'll see. I don't know, but I'm hopeful that I'll get to some other places nearby. And what I found was when I got to India, it was so different from what I was accustomed to that it was challenging me in ways that were forcing me to grow. And I had to go inward to achieve that growth. And so that time there led to kind of what the places that I went after that. So when I got to India, I was trying to find an apartment in Chennai, and through a friend of a friend, I was getting help with that process, but I was staying in a hotel for the first like 2 weeks when I got there. And the hotel, I remember on like the second or third day, I needed to get some cash because where I was going, I couldn't use my credit card. I needed to pay in rupees. And so I went down to the hotel lobby because I just assumed that they had an ATM. And after circling it, they didn't. And I went to the front desk and I asked, and the lady said, "Oh yeah, you just cross the street and there's one on the other side." And so then I'm thinking, is there a street on the back side of the hotel? And I said, "You mean back there?" And she goes, "No, no, just the street." And I was like, "The multi-lane freeway?" And, and she
That is
didn't.
terrifying in India. Yes.
And so I'll skip the story of what happened, but that experience allowed me to see that it allowed me to see that I had been operating off of a framework that didn't exist anymore, because when I had traveled prior to that, I always had a fixed amount of time. And so you would sometimes like sign up for certain tours when you get certain places, and people would take you places. But I was actually traveling for a long time, and I was traveling slowly, and I was, getting an apartment in this city to stay for a period of time. And so I needed to navigate it like a local, and I didn't have the tour guides and the other sorts of things, and I wasn't on a deployment where there were rules about, you don't cross the freeways and you use the Humvees or whatever to get from here to there. And so I started to see that I needed to examine a lot more of the beliefs that I was holding, because they were either going to allow me to have a good experience there, or I was going to be so stressed that I needed to leave. And I and I realized that, okay, I'm actually the trigger for the resilience that I'm needing in this moment. Let me go back and do some reflection. And that was just the beginning of getting the opportunity to better see myself and how I was handling change and relating to it. And fast forward a few months later, I left India. I went to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, and then I went to visit some friends in Malaysia, and then I went to Singapore, and then I got to Vietnam, and I was, using Grab motorbike to take me from place to place. And, and I would have never done that, if you'd gone back just a few months before that. But what I was seeing through my experiences was that by doing the work to better observe myself and how I was relating to things, that I could be intentional about making decisions and designing new experiences that opened me up to the world and the possibilities in an entirely different way.
Mind-blowing story. And that culture shock moment is something that I definitely like full props to you to be able to navigate it. I think the two most terrifying streets I've ever had to cross was India and Vietnam. So I completely see okay. And I was in India earlier this year, like during the trip we had a family emergency. And one of the things that just navigating that in a different country, or not even doing that, watching like my family have to navigate that in a completely different country, really just blew my mind of how different things are in different parts of the world, and how in a way how you've got to operate and think differently, and how they were being very resilient and how they were like really adapting to things. So I really think, as you're right, it's about examining the differences, and also being able to internalize all that. And there's a few things you mentioned. You mentioned mindset, you mentioned resilience, and from your story itself I see a lot of courage in a sense. And those three components is something that I think you mentioned in your coaching, in your
Yeah.
ethos behind, I think, Excellence Unbounded, that kind of lead to innovation in a sense. I see the importance of mindset, courage, and like I would definitely agree, resilience. How they lead
Mhm.
to innovation, I'm very, very curious about. So kind of moving forward, and as we kind of wind down this conversation, how do you bring together these three different elements in when you work with entrepreneurs, as an entrepreneur yourself, in a sense, to
Mhm.
drive innovation? How do all of these experiences that you've been talking about so far lead to innovation in of itself?
Yes. So in conversations when I was traveling, these themes kept coming up. And so I thought I should really look at this, because I've had hours and hours and hours of conversations and these themes keep bubbling up. And so I'm a big believer. The Army has a phrase that is very common. It's bottom line up front. And so when you prepare briefings, when you go into meetings, it's very common that they'll say, we're going to start with the bluff, the bottom line up front. And then that allows everybody to know, okay, here's where we're trying to go. And now that I've got that context, I can participate as appropriate. And so I'm a big believer in the bottom line up front and in beginning with the end in mind. And if you think about innovation being the thing that is so often pursued when someone decides to start a business, when an investor is looking for a business to invest in, all of these are hoping to innovate in some sort of way. And the best definition of innovation that I like to use is one by an innovation consultant. His name is Jorge Barba, and he says it's the future delivered. And so if we think about delivering that future, we know that it's going to require that you embrace uncertainty. We know that it's going to require that you are flexible and that you can adapt and that you can pivot and you can do all of these things. But in order to do all of those things, you have to go back and look at what is the mindset of the entrepreneur. And mindset is just beliefs that really shape and inform how we sort things out, how we make decisions, all of that. If you can get clarity about that, then you can better understand how that's actually impacting your ability to be courageous or not. People that find that they're unable to venture forth when they're facing that adversity or the fear, all of that, it always goes back to some belief that they hold. So if you can better understand what your beliefs are, then you can unlock the courage. But we all know that just because we try something once or 100 times doesn't mean that we will be successful. So there's the need to also be resilient and to adapt when you are facing like that significant stress or the trauma or just that difficulty, and to be able to iterate as many times as is necessary. And I think Thomas Edison offers us so many great stories of the value of that resilience and that ability to iterate through that. And so for me, the relationship between those three capacities is critical if we're going to actually support entrepreneurs in unlocking the innovation that they're seeking.
I often speak a lot about, mindset and resilience, because those are two things that for me personally as a social entrepreneur has been very, very, I would say, integral to my own journey in a sense. I think without somebody there constantly like watching my mindset in a sense and telling me, hey, you're going a little off track in the thoughts there, Harsha. And without, having the consistent action, I have a new phrase for it thanks to you, the battle. Sorry, I'm gonna stop using it. Yeah, but yeah, but the battle rhythm. But yeah, like that resilience in a sense. Those are the two things that's always been very, very helpful to me in a sense. And I just got lucky with the courage that I have amazing people with me. But I've never acknowledged that centerpiece of courage in and of itself. And I think as the more you think, the more you the way that you kind of spread that out, I think that is actually something that we as social entrepreneurs need to look into a lot more, and see the relationship between that courage aspect with the mindset and with moving forward with resilience. Because many times you're right, it's fear that stops us from something, whether it's going to the next level, whether sometimes it's fear of success, fear of failure in a sense. And it's something that I'm going to go home and think about and have a few sleepless nights about. And really try to I really try to see where that fits into my own circle that you're talking about. But for all of them, who probably will have sleepless nights as well for the next couple of days. Final question for our interview, in a sense, is for all the social entrepreneurs out there who wish that they can live a life as full and exciting and as interesting as yours, in a sense, where do we get started?
I think it's really just being open to the possibilities and not closing doors. My oldest niece is in college now, and she's applying for the program that is where she wants to major, and they have a select number that they accept, and so she's of course got some nerves about it because she feels very strongly. But I always tell her that as long as you move forward and you try new things and you make other people close doors, don't close them yourself, because so many people do that. I promise you that I've gotten opportunities that I probably, if everybody who was truly competitive had competed, I may not have gotten the opportunity. But what I found through my time in the Army when I was applying for different opportunities, now as an entrepreneur, all of that, is that many, many people will rule themselves out instead of rule themselves in, and force somebody else to rule them out. And so I think that that's a big part of having whatever your amazing journey is supposed to be. Start by always ruling yourself in and make somebody else rule you out.
Okay, very brilliant note to end on. Rule yourself in. Again, I'm gonna take a mental note. I think you just explained things so much nicer than I can ever articulate. So I
No,
really,
I
really
don't agree with
appreciate you
that.
taking your time. No, but I do appreciate you taking your time out for this interview, and thank you so much for being on the show. I learned so much, and I think our audience definitely has so much to learn from you. So once again, really am a huge fan of your ethos, your way of looking at life, and appreciate you coming and sharing with that here on Changing Reality with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Harsha. It's been wonderful to get to know you over time and the work that you're doing. I am a big fan. So it's a true honor to join you on Changing Reality.
All right. And you are definitely way too kind. But with that, I think I will wrap up our show for today. And for all of you watching, this has been another episode of Changing Reality. And we'll see you again next week and see how you've been changing your reality as well. So thank you guys, and see y'all next Thursday as always. Bye. You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.